as she mentioned. I was a former Hacker Refactor president. I was the first one that actually stood up Hacker Refactor. And a little bit about me. I was in the active duty Army for about 8 years. And I was doing information security, and I was also doing defensive cybersecurity. As far as my educational background, I have my associate's degree in IT. I also have my bachelor's of computer science here from OSU Cascades. And then I'm currently pursuing my master's in computer science at Syracuse University. Some of my professional background, I have worked at Le Schwab. I was working for their accounting team, and I was doing back-end software development. And my new job, I work at SDVI, and I'm a full stack software engineer there. And the tech stack that we use is Angular, and Vue, and then we also use AWS. And that's a little bit about me. Okay, so my very first experience with coding interviews was at the Grace Hopper conference. I don't know if you guys have ever been mentioned that. So there's this big conference at Grace Hopper. They usually do it in Orlando, Florida. And I got lucky enough to do it before COVID hit. So it was an in-person conference. And there was over 25,000 to 30,000 engineers there. And there's this big career fair that has all the big tech companies on there, Apple, Netflix, pretty much Bing. I got a couple interviews while I was there. My first one was with Capital One, the banking company. And I got through the behavioral round, and they wanted me to do the technical coding interview round. And so basically, I got there and they gave me a sheet of paper, 2 sheets of paper, and a pencil. And they gave me 3 problems, and I was supposed to solve them in an hour each. So I spent 3 hours coding on paper, never had any experience at all. So I was freaking out through the whole thing. So I was so glad that Nikita asked me to do this, because this is a very scary situation, coding on demand in front of people without having any experiences or any tips on how to do it. And so, yeah, I pretty much failed the interview, spent 3 hours. And then as I progressively gotten better at the coding interview process, it's a science, there's technique to it. I was able to collect some tips and tricks on how you guys can not freak out and remain calm, and how to get better at it, because practice makes perfect. Okay, so the agenda, we're going to go ahead and talk about the purpose of the coding interview. And then we're going to talk about how we can prepare for it in a strategic and technical manner. And then we're going to do a what to do during coding interview, which is very important. And then I'm going to go ahead and do kind of like a demo of how the technical interview is going to go down, where I'll be the interviewee and then Nikita will be the interviewer. And I'll go ahead and show you all the tips and tricks that I was talking into the prior slides and putting it into application. Okay, and then another thing about the coding interview process is that you could be asked to do it on paper, you could be asked to do it on a board, or you can be asked to do it on REPL. And it all just depends on what type of company you're going through. So I personally feel like it's better to do it on paper, so that you're writing down your thought process and you're actually learning rather than typing and mindlessly typing. But that's just my opinion. All right, and then we're going to go over a example coding question, and I want you guys to really apply the things and the tips that I'm saying into this example coding question, and take about 25 minutes. So if you want, go ahead and bring up whatever text editor you want to do, or actually we're just already going to do paper. Never mind, disregard. And then after that, we'll go over the solution. And if anybody feels comfortable sharing it, just let me know. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. All right, so the purpose of the coding interview is not necessarily on how accurate you can get the answer correct or solve it correctly. It's more about how your problem solving skills translate into their company culture. So the employers are looking for, is this candidate able to problem solve and do it in a strategic and methodical manner? Because if they can do that, then they'll be able to end up at the right answer. And then also they're wanting you to demonstrate how you communicate your problem solving skills, because when you're with a team, you're having to bounce off ideas. And if that person doesn't know what you're talking about, or you're not communicating effectively, then you guys are just going to go down a rabbit hole on solving the problem. And then your organizational skills, they want to see that you're taking a methodical and technical approach and not just going right into the coding process. Really, really, really understand what the problem is, and then kind of create your structure of how you want to relay what you're going to communicate to your employer or the person that's interviewing you. And then they are also wanting you to see and what you're like under pressure, because sometimes, as you know, during like pull requests and merges, things break and they need you to be able to fix it right on the spot, do a hot fix. And they're kind of like making sure that you have that composure and that discipline in order for you to get through that, that problem. All right, so how to prepare for this coding interview. I have this lovely book called Cracking the Coding Interview. I've used it on many of my my interviews, and then I took a piece of this page and put it up here because there's this map on how you guys can plan out when your coding interview is, so that you can back plan on what you need to do in preparation for that coding interview. And then there's a few things I want to emphasize here. That's why I have the 4-week mark up to the day after highlighted. So I'm just going to go through some of it. So the first 4 weeks, the book suggests that you review and update your resume. You want to be up to date, because if you don't have your contact information or anything administrative, like you might not get the invite to the coding interview. So that's really important. And then start applying for companies that you know you want to work with. So that's the 4 weeks out. And then after you start applying, start conducting mock interviews with either your peer, or you can record yourself. I like doing it with a peer because I don't like recording myself. But yeah, after you're done doing your mock interview, just choose a question out of here while you're doing your mock interview, by the way. Conduct a retrospective, see how you did. And the format of the retrospective that really helps is to write down 3 things that you did right, 3 things that you didn't do right, and then 3 things that you can do to improve on that mock interview. And it really helps, especially if you don't get the callback, or that way you can figure out what you need to work on in the next interview. And then practice your questions that you write from your coding problems on paper. Like I said, it helps to reinforce the learning and not memorization, because what we don't want to do is memorize the problem, memorize the solution, because you're not really conveying that you're problem solving. You're just showing that you're just a robot regurgitating information. And so, yeah. So that's the 4-week mark. So at the 1-week mark, if you have a remote interview, make sure that you have all your headsets, all your mics and video cameras in one location, and then test it to see if it's working. Because the last thing you want to do is have a video not showing, or your mic, you can't figure it out, and you spent the whole 10-15 minutes just trying to troubleshoot that. And that looks poorly on you with the company. and then do a final mock interview. Again, pick a question, and then go ahead and do your retrospective. And then this recommends to brush up on Big O. How many of you guys have learned Big O implementation yet? Perfect, 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 because that's important. Like, it's okay to create a brute force implementation, but if they want it to be optimized, you have to know, like, okay, this is an O of n squared implementation. How can I make this faster? And communicate that. So it suggests to brush up on your Big O implementations and how that works. And then do a couple more interview questions and do another retrospective. So that's 1 week. The day before, really important. Review all 3 of those retrospectives and make sure that you worked on all of them, all of your things that you are not comfortable with or the things that you did wrong in those mock interviews. And then go to sleep at a reasonable time. Get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep, because you're going to need that brain power to do some problem solving, because you'll be coding for at least, I don't know, the longest I coded was like 4 hours, but some 1 to 4 hours, depending, because it'll be like they want to do multiple questions and want to test you out on different types of problems. So make sure you get some sleep. So that's the day before. So the day of, and I'm going to emphasize this on the next slide as well, is to wake up at a reasonable time. You want to be prepared. You want to have a good breakfast and be on time for your interview. About 10 minutes before is suggested. And then be confident while you're doing your interview. That's a little an understatement. Is like, oh, be confident, but how do you be confident? Well, for me, and what I've learned is that when you remain your composure and you stay disciplined during the time of your coding interview, it'll help guide you to not freak out, get yourself together, stay structured, and stay on path. So that's my little trick, is to kind of just like, take a deep breath. You've got this. This is my next step that I'm going to be doing. Don't let them see that you're freaking out, even though internally you are going to be freaking out. But yeah, if you are not confident, you need to ask yourself, did I do enough preparation? Why am I not confident? And then that way, after the interview, you can go ahead and address those and conduct another retrospective. So that's the day of. So the day after, this is optional. You don't have to do this, but this will get you little kudos with the employer. It's to write a thank you note or email saying thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. And then if you don't hear anything back within 1 week, make sure that you check in with the recruiter and ask about the status. Okay. And then if you don't get an offer, try to make a lesson out of it and review the AAR or the retrospective that you just did about the interview. And that will help you understand what you're lacking on and what you can improve upon the next interview that you get. So don't take it as a loss. I think people will get down in that pitfall of like, because when I did the Capital One interview, I was like, oh, I'm a shit programmer, excuse my language. But no, if I was to just take that as a lesson of the things that I did wrong and then work upon it, I think I would have seen a better and more actionable thing that I did. So yeah, so yes, so if you do get an offer, make sure you celebrate, and then make sure that the offer matches what other employers in your area are offering that level of employee salary. So do your market research. Yes.
How would you check?
Glassdoor, internet, like, yeah, it won't give you an exact amount, but it'll give you a range. And if they're lowballing you, you want to go ahead and negotiate that. And it is best if you negotiate it a little bit above your the area's salary. Yeah. So don't be afraid to ask, because they have money. They have a budget. So yes. Any questions?
How would you go about negotiating? Like I think that's really cool, but I don't like seem grateful. So like, how would you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had an actual recent experience about this with my new job. I did a market research in my area, and I was saying, so look at their benefits, and then look at the target market research of the area. And what I did was, I was like, okay, so your benefits don't include a bonus every year. So I think it's only fair if I were to ask for that included into my salary. Or you can be like, well, the current position that I'm applying for in this area is reaching this. Do you think we can either match it or go, or I would even say I would do like $2,000 or $3,000 above what they're asking for, just to kind of see what they say. And if they can't, they'll always raise it. They'll always raise your offer, but they're looking for you to ask for it. That's the thing. That was my first pitfall in my first job at Le Schwab. I didn't ask for anything. I just took it. I was like, oh, my job. Okay, cool. But yeah. Great question.
Sounds like we need another bite session. Just how to ask for a raise.
In a polite way.
In a polite way.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so again, this is what I want to re-emphasize is what to do during coding interview. I want you to breathe, remain confident. You are going to stumble and you're going to say ums, ahs, whatever. But the point is to make sure that you stay grounded and you stay in the zone of your problem solving. Because if you go down this rabbit hole, they'll be like, oh, they're just getting flustered. Like, what are they going to do in a real life situation? So it's really important to just remain focused. You know, if you get flustered, take a deep breath, take a moment for yourself, retrace your steps of where your thoughts were. If you have to go back to the very first step of your thought process, then do so. Let's see. The next one is have a good understanding of the problem. They're going to give you a prompt, and make sure you're dissecting each detail of that problem. You want to ask them, or you want to pay attention to, like, what type of variables are this? Is this an array? Is this an integer? What am I returning? And then you want to ask about your inputs and your outputs. If I input this, what am I going to get output? And make sure that it's clarified so that you're not just going into this with an assumption. Then because if you do go in with assumption, you code it and they're like, that's not what I want. You just wasted that much time. Again, this is a timed interview. You want to stay structured, methodical, and also by doing so, you'll save time. Let's see. Yes, so it is okay for you to ask meaningful questions, like the inputs and outputs and the clarification. If you don't understand the problem, ask. Please ask. And they're more than willing to, they're not going to be the gatekeepers and be like, oh, I'm going to make this as hard as possible. They want you to succeed, right? So if you can ask meaningful and valuable questions, like clarifying what the problem is, they're going to say like, oh, you're taking this seriously. And then I highlighted this one because every programmer here has a preferred language. And that just helps with your confidence as well. Like if you know the language, like, okay, that's one less thing I'm not going to be freaked out about. My preferred language is JavaScript. I don't know about y'all's, but also it is recommended Python is a good language to do coding interviews. It's very readable. You don't have to learn too many isms about it. So yeah. Also, pseudocode and plan your implementation. So when you pseudocode, it doesn't have to be syntactically correct. Just make sure the logic makes sense. Or even write down your algorithm step by step. So step 1, I'm going to do this. Step 2, I'm going to do this, or whatever. So that just helps to structure your code and also not have to code on the spot. It really like helps you to like, okay, I know how to translate that into code because I'm comfortable with this code. I'm comfortable with Python. I'm comfortable with JavaScript. So yeah. And then, like I said, talk through your problem solving, make sure you're communicating that this is what you're doing. If you have any issues or you're not quite sure, ask them, but talk through your problem solving skills to the point where they're annoyed by you. Over communicate. Okay, and then the last thing is you guys don't have to do this, but this is a great like technique that I've done is I just brute force everything at first with the implementation. That way I know for sure that it's going to work, and then I can optimize it afterwards, right? Because that will show, okay, yeah, you have this implementation, and then the employers are going to be like, oh, you know how to make it faster. That's great. So that'll just give you more bonus points. Any questions? No? Yes.
For reversing, so even if it takes like few minutes to run a program, like do you think it's an and where the answer for a large array or something?
Right. So I think that's a great question, which we actually have a problem like that. But the important thing is that you're really communicating how you're solving the problem. Now, how particularly you solve the problem. It's not necessarily the importance of it because it'll work, right? I think it's you communicating, and then you are able to refactor and optimize afterwards is what's going to get you in the win.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Because if you're stuck with a problem and you're like, how do I optimize this now? You're wasting time thinking about optimization rather than solving the problem.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little role play. And Nikita is going to